What you guys, got another video here for you on the top 11 reasons why your computer crashes. So that's what we're going to be covering in this video. This video did take quite a bit of time to put together, so I hope you appreciate it and give the video a thumbs up. So let's take a look at the first one: hardware conflicts or problems with your hardware, misconfigured hardware. Sometimes this can cause random crashes and freezing and also blue screens and stuff like that. So always check with the compatibility list and make sure all the hardware is compatible. Make sure everything is inserted correctly. And another big problem nowadays is the introduction of hardware that is cheap from China, and some of this may not be on the compatibility list for some of the big major companies like Asus, Gigabyte, MSI and so on. Some of these cheaper brand RAM sticks that you can find may not play well with that motherboard, and you could end up having issues. It may boot, but when you go to use XMP or something like that, you could run into problems and end up with blue screens or even no post and boots issues and stuff like that with that type of hardware. So be very careful when you're buying your hardware. Make sure you look at the compatibility list and make sure other people are having no known issues with that particular type of hardware with the hardware that you're thinking of buying. That's probably one of the most common things, is buying something cheap and basically sticking it in your computer and it starts to cause problems. So they're the sort of things you want to look out for when you're buying your PC hardware. Next up is dust and overheating. Your computer needs to breathe properly just like you do, and if it's clogged with dust like this will stop airflow and it can cause major overheating problems. This is a really common problem and people don't keep their PCs clean enough. You want to blow it out and get rid of all of the dust inside of there and make sure that it's not overheating. Another thing is insufficient cooling or a failing CPU cooler. You may also have other issues which is causing overheating as well. So like not enough thermal paste, or the thermal paste is drying out, or maybe you're pushing your overclocks and putting too much voltage through and you're getting some random crashes and it's overheating. So just check for all those things. You can check HW monitor for temperatures and voltage and all that sort of good stuff, and try to keep within the parameters of that particular type of hardware. Now, overclocking is probably one of the biggest causes of this, where people push too much voltage through the CPU, or they're just pushing their hardware far too far, and it causes a lot of instability and you'll get a lot of blue screens and crashing and things like that. So just take care when you're doing overclocking. You can overclock if you wish, but just make sure you follow the simple rule of thumb as not pushing too much voltage through the hardware that you're using, because if you do, you're going to shorten the life of that hardware and cause a lot of instability. Now, another common problem is the motherboard is going bad or your CPU is going bad. These ones are probably the most tricky to find out which is going bad first. Normally, I would start to look towards the motherboard. Now, I have had CPU failures before, but it's very rare and it's not often that they do fail. Now, obviously, if you are overclocking or you're doing things like that, it's possible that you have caused some major hardware problems. But in most cases, I would normally point towards the motherboard, but that's not to rule out that it isn't the CPU altogether. So check all the socket itself, make sure you check the pins if you are buying hardware that is used. Make sure you run some sort of stability test to make sure everything is running okay. Now, normally when you start to overclock the CPUs, they can start to cause problems. So if you are doing that, then check. And again, with used CPUs and also used motherboards, which you can buy freely available on places like eBay and places like that, just bear in mind that these may not have been tested before you buy them, and this can cause problems. So you want to make sure that they are not causing any problems whatsoever. You're probably going to want to run a variety of different tests to make sure that the stability of that hardware is okay. And again, with bad motherboards, they can be very intermittent. You may be using the PC for a while and then all of a sudden it will crash. Now, you can use things like Prime 95, which will push the CPU to the maximum of its capabilities, And again, what this will do is determine whether the CPU is going bad. You can check the thermals to make sure the thermals are not creeping up above what the general recommendation are for that particular CPU. And again, you can then start to investigate a little bit further. Now this video is just to give you some ideas on how to test your hardware. Again, motherboards can be tested with a multimeter and also tested that way, but again, you won't find little intermittent problems like that with that sort of method. If that's only if you've got failed motherboard and things like that. This is more about intermittent problems and also crashing. So running something like this for around about 15 minutes will generally tell whether that CPU is dying or it's going bad. Now you'd normally see the thermals go right up, they will start to go above what it's recommended, and it will start to thermal throttle and shut down. Now sometimes reapplying thermal grease underneath the heat spreader will resolve a lot of these problems, especially if it's an older CPU and the thermal grease is started to dry out. You can normally lift or delid it, the heat spreader, and start to put some new thermal paste on underneath there, and that should resolve a lot of those problems. But if it is going bad and it's a hardware problem, then there's not much you can do about it. It's just time to replace that hardware. And you can take a look here at your temps. Just make sure you check with the recommended temps for that particular CPU and motherboard. So here we have another one, which is your hard drive is going bad or it's failing. This is another common problem. When hard drives start to fail, you will get locking up, freezing, blue screens, and also just random crashes. Even loss of data can be another cause of these drives going bad. When you start seeing problems, you need to investigate further. Now you can use programs like Crystal Disk Info, and normally this is a great indicator of when your hard drive is starting to fail. Whether it be an SSD or a mechanical drive, you can check the smart readings of that drive and then start to determine how old the drive is, how many power on count hours it's got, and how many power on times it's been done, and a bunch of other information like bad sectors and things like that. You will get caution signs like these with temperature warnings and reallocated sector counts, raw read error rate, and things like that. You will get really bad messages like this if the drive is starting to fail. Then you may want to do a test with something like CTools for Windows, which will normally do a sector by sector test of that drive, and you can do a thorough test to make sure the drive is not bad. If you do see red in Crystal Disk, I wouldn't even bother running this, because normally the drive is already bad and it's failed, so it's not worth doing any more work on that drive. You may as well just try and get the data off and replace the drive. Another common question I get is, can I still use that drive if it has bad sectors? And the answer to that is yes, in some cases you can, but it's not advisable, because you'd end up eventually having that drive die and you would end up losing all of your data. So as soon as you get bad sectors, now there is ways of marking bad sectors so Windows ignores them, but at the end of the day, a bad sector is a bad sector, and it is bad and it's going to be on that drive, and if it lets go, it's going to cause a major problem with your drive. So it's time to replace that drive. Okay, now you can run tests on here. If you're not quite familiar with what's going on, you can run a quick short test, but it's much more better to do a sector by sector long test on these drives, and it will give you a much better readout and you will know whether that drive is going bad. But normally a smart is the first place to start on there. Now moving on to another area, which is malware. Malware can cause major problems with computers, and if you've got malware on your PC and you don't know whether you've got it, you need to start thinking about running some scans. And yes, I did say the word scans and not scan. I see so many people telling people just to run Malwarebytes, and that is not enough. You need to run different scans. If you start detecting malware on your system, there's going to be more malware on there. Now Malwarebytes is pretty good, but you do need to run other scans as well as Malwarebytes, just to make sure that you've got every piece of malware off of that computer. Now this could be Trojans, this could be adware, it could be rootkits, there could be all sorts of stuff that's on your system, and you need to make sure that it's all removed. Now thankfully Windows 10 is a lot more secure than previous generations of Windows, and that means you don't get as many infections as you used to back in the old days with Windows XP, Windows 7 and Windows Vista. It used to be horrible. It used to grind the system to a halt, and it was very difficult to remove malware because there was so much of it about. So nowadays there's still loads of malware about, but you just have a lot more security with Windows 10. So if your PC is starting to act peculiar, or your anti-malware or antivirus program has been disabled for some reason, there's a good sign that there's malware on the system, and it's deliberately done that so it can infiltrate the system and get loads more malware on there. So just make sure that you run scans, and it doesn't really matter which one you prefer, just make sure you run some sort of full scan of the computer, and if it comes back clean, there's a good sign that you haven't got malware on the computer. Now normally Malwarebytes will pick up something, so it's always best to start with something like this, and it will normally detect some sort of infection. If you start seeing infections on there, it's time to think about running some more scans. Now if this is all too much, you can reinstall Windows, but there is other programs like Hitman Pro. You can run a 30-day trial on here and run a scan with that. This normally picks up a load of other stuff, and again we've got things like MCSoft, and also we've got ESET Online Scanner, and there's a load of other tools out there which you can do. I've made tons of videos on this sort of stuff many years ago, and not so long ago I did make an updated video, so you can always check those videos out and make sure you run full scans on the PC to make sure there is no infection on the computer. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is going to be related to software and games. Now sometimes when you're installing software, you may have installed some sort of software on the system and it may be causing a problem. So you want to go to Add and Remove Programs and remove that latest piece of software that you installed from the system. Normally this resolves a lot of problems. Some people even try to install far too much security, like 2 antivirus programs, and this can cause some problems as well. And thankfully in 2020 that problem has sort of been resolved a little bit, because it will notify you and tell you that you've already got pieces of security software on your system, but it's still possible to happen. Next one is corrupt or outdated drivers. This can cause major problems and also very difficult to detect. Now Patch My PC will check your PC for any sort of outdated drivers, and you will be able to then download and install those particular updates. Even old versions of Windows 10 that you may be using may be causing problems, so it may be time to roll out that update to the latest version. And even when you have rolled out that latest update to the latest version of Windows 10, that can still cause some problems, which you may want to think about considering rolling back if you are having issues after you've done the latest update. Another one is blue screen of deaths. You can check the dump files online with OCR Online. You'll be able to sign up here and upload your mini dump files. These are on your system. Every time you get a blue screen of death or some sort of issue like that, it will leave a little crash dump file, which you can then open up or upload to places like this, which will then tell you roughly what has happened to your PC. It's normally pointing towards some sort of .sys file or driver related issue, or it could be hardware. Sometimes these blue screen of deaths can give you some good information, and sometimes it can be very vague and take a bit more expertise to find out what is going wrong. Now you can use programs like Who Crashed and also Blue Screen View. This will analyze the system and analyze that dump file and put the information into some sort of readable text format inside here, which will then allow you to find out what is going on with your PC. Now sometimes it's pretty simple. It will point to a driver, and it may be a graphics driver or something like that, which you can then update the driver, uninstall it and put a new driver on, and it sometimes fixes and resolves the problem. Sometimes they're more complex and they can be a little bit more difficult to read, and you may need a bit of help with that, and that's where PC repair techs come in, or some sort of support forums or places like that, which can help you understand what is going wrong with your PC. So that said, that is the blue screens view, and also who crashed. They're pretty useful programs. Now another thing you want to take a look at is corrupt registry. Sometimes a corrupt Windows registry or corrupt Windows file can cause problems. Running tools like sfc//scan now inside an elevated command prompt will give you an inkling of whether your operating system is in good health and whether there's any problems. So running a full in-depth scan like this will normally detect corrupt files. You can see here we've got no problems with our system, and that is normally the first place where you would look. Now you can use the dism command, which normally has a bunch of other features inside here which you can run, which will normally determine whether you've got any sort of corrupt files in here, and I'll show you how to run those. So basically what you want to run inside here is, I'll just clear this screen here and we'll type in a dism, and then you want to do space / and then you want to do online and then space / and then you want cleanup - image, and then after that you want to do space / and then you can do check health. Now this is the very first command that you can run, and this normally checks the health of the system, and it will start to give you some information about it. It will say no component store corruption detected. If that's the case, then you're in good stead. Next one, you can do the up arrow key on your keyboard, and this will bring up the command again and change the end part to scan health. This will actually run a scan on the system and check the health, even though we've already detected there is no corruption. But if you have, you can run scan health. This will then create a log file and give you a load more information about what is going on with the system, and you can then investigate further. I'll speed this process up just so we can get this done, and you'll see at the end it will tell me I don't have any sort of problems, but if you do, it will list them, and that's exactly what you're trying to do. Now if you do have problems and it has detected them, you can do the restore health command, but you only want to run that if you do have some sort of corruption with your system. You can see here I don't have one, but I'll show you the command anyway, so you can actually type this in. So it'll be dism space / online space / cleanup - image space / restore health. When you run this, it will try to restore the health of that image, and it will try to resolve those problems. Once it's run that scan, what you can do is then run sfc space / scan now again to see if that problem has been resolved. Another one is your BIOS settings. Now if you've been overclocking or you've been inside the BIOS and you've been making changes inside the BIOS, then you need to reset your BIOS back to default settings, and this way it will remove any overclocks or any sort of tweaks that you've been doing inside the BIOS, and this can cause instability and problems. Now when you're inside the BIOS, you will see load optimized defaults, and this is exactly what you want to do. This will reset everything back to default settings. Sometimes checking your battery inside the motherboard will also help. By replacing that battery, you can then find out whether there is any more issues with it. Now the next problem we're looking at is power issues. Now this could be a bad power supply or a failing power supply, insufficient power from your power supply, not delivering enough power to your graphics card, and things like that can cause instability and crashes. Intermittent problems with your power supply, maybe there's some issues with it, maybe you need to start thinking about upgrading, maybe it's a cheap power supply and you may be best off just replacing the power supply altogether. It's a good starting point. This is a normal common place where a lot of problems lie with bad power or bad power supplies, and I would have always advised people to check there first. Bad power supplies are probably one of the most common areas where people cheap out on power supplies and buy some sort of cheap brand and expect it to do a really good job. It might work for a while and then you'll start running into issues, and when that fails it can take hardware with it. So that's why it's always best to buy the best possible power supply that you can get. Now I've done videos about what power supplies you should buy, and there is a video up on my channel about that. Next up, we're taking a look at memory or bad memory. This is another problem which can cause major problems with the PC when you've got bad memory sticks or intermittent problems with memory. Now whether your memory is new or whether it's used, I've seen memory cause major problems with a PC, and you can use programs like memtest and programs like that to test the memory, but the best way to test memory is to swap it out. Now you can see we've got one stick inside here. You want to power this on and see if the problem goes away. If the problem goes away, you know it's one of your sticks has gone bad. You can swap this stick over with the other one and find out whether the problem comes back again. If it does, then you know that stick is bad. You can also run swaps with your PC, so if you've got some other memory lying around, I'd advise you to swap it out and use one stick in there and see whether that resolves a lot of the problem. Now memory can cause major issues with the PC. I mean literally freezing, shutting down, blue screens, just about any sort of problem I've seen memory cause over the years. And again, sometimes it can be hard to detect. Now we have some memory here which you could swap out, and I always say this is probably your best method possible. Now if you haven't got any spare memory, then the other option for you is to use something like memtest, and you can put that onto a USB flash drive, boot to it, and then run a full diagnostic test of your memory. How long does this take? Well, if the memory is really bad and it shows errors straight away, you don't need to test it anymore. You could just stop and replace that memory. But if you've got intermittent issues, you may have to run long tests for this to find the actual problem, and this can take many hours to run tests. I've seen people on YouTube trying to do a test like this for 15 minutes and then say the memory is good. That is not good enough. You need to run at least 4 to 7 passes to make sure that the memory has been fully tested. You want to make sure you test the memory fully to make sure those intermittent issues are detected. Now they're probably the most hardest ones to detect, is the little intermittent ones. The ones where the memory stick is completely bad, what normally happens is as soon as you run the test, you will start getting red errors coming up and you will know that the memory is bad. So again, it's just going to come down to how fast your PC is and what sort of test, exhaustive test you run. So if you do a massive test on here, it will take quite a few hours to get through, but it will detect a lot of those intermittent problems that you're having. So running a quick short test on this memory is not always the quickest and best solution. Sometimes it does take a bit more time. You will see it coming up on the screen here. You'll see errors and it will be listed on there, and it will go red and normally tell you that you've got problems with your RAM. And again, if you've got more than one stick, on this system it had 8 sticks of memory, and that will take quite a bit of time to test all those 8 sticks. Again, you may have one stick that's bad and all the rest are perfectly fine, and you have to find out which one of those sticks is bad. That's why I prefer the swap out method of swapping memory out and running the same things that you was doing when it was crashing, and that way if it doesn't crash anymore, it's pretty much the case has been solved. It was a memory issue, and it will save you many hours of testing with a piece of software like Passmark. Nothing wrong with Passmark, it just takes quite a bit of time to sometimes find those intermittent problems, as I've said. Now there's one last thing that I think is a good thing to do with your computer, and that is do a fresh install. You can go into the settings, update and security here, and when you go into here you can go into recovery, and what I'd advise you to do is do a fresh install here. You can see we've got an area here that says go back to the previous version of Windows. If you have installed the latest version of Windows through this method, you may want to roll back, and the reason for that is because there may be an issue with that. But other than that, you want to go into reset this PC. Click on get started, and then what you can do here is move on to the next section here, which says keep my files or remove everything. I would advise you to back all your data up first and then go on to the remove everything. The reason why is because we want to remove everything from the computer and make sure there's nothing on the system whatsoever. Click on that selection there after you've got all your data backed up, and this will move on to the next section because this will delete just about everything on the computer, including programs and your data, so bear that in mind. It's asking you how you would like to reinstall Windows, through the cloud download or through the local reinstall. So depending on which way you want to go about it, let's just assume that you're going to go onto the cloud download and go through that method. You can then click on cloud download and it will download it via the cloud and start to install. So you can see that's going to remove apps and all the files, do not clean the drive, and download and reinstall Windows. You can change those settings if you wish, and also you can see here cloud download can be more than 4 gigabytes. So you need to see here clean data. This is if you're removing all of the data and doing a clean erase on here. If you was getting rid of the PC, you would do that. You don't need to do that for this case. You just download and it will then reinstall and wipe all the data from the system, and then you can confirm this and it will then move on to reinstall. The reason why you want to do that is because what will happen is this will then tell you whether you've got a hardware issue, because if the hardware issue reoccurs or you've got the problem reoccurring, you know you've just done a fresh install and it's got to be hardware related. So sometimes doing that at the very beginning is a really good way of quickly determining whether it's a hardware or software issue. Anyway, I hope this one's been useful to you. My name has been Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. I shall see you again for another video real soon. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for the long one, but it had to be done because it's quite a complex issue to sort of diagnose and troubleshoot. But anyway, have a great weekend. Bye for now. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the red subscribe button and then hit the bell notification button and click all to be notified when we upload new videos.